Hey, welcome to the Camden and Otis show. Here we are, January. God, what is it about January? I don't remember if you and I have talked about this on the show before. We've probably talked about this. Damn, it's a long month.
Yeah.
Damn. I didn't think it. Man, whew.
It's the hangover month. That's what I've been calling it.
Maybe that's why, because it is long, and but it gives you that opportunity to set things up in transition, right? Because as long as we're in January, we're still at the beginning of the year, and we still got time to set those goals and all that sort of stuff. And that's where it drives us to today. What we're going to do today is talk about clarity and having clarity in what you want to do, what you want to achieve, where you want to go, who you want to be. If you have clarity in those things, guess what? You'll get them. You'll achieve them. Maybe not on the timeline in your little mind, but you will achieve them, because if you have clarity of what it is you want, then you can see, break it apart and see how to get that thing that you want.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You know, the way I've been thinking about it building up to this episode, we've been talking about focus, of course. And I think both of us probably, and I could thank you for this, is I naturally go, when I think about focus, I go to hunting, because I think about looking through the scope and looking out at the animal, right? When you're out there in the field. Now, if focus is looking out and seeing what you're looking at for and looking out and getting it right in focus, so you can actually see things and it's not blurry. Clarity is recognizing what's a bush, what's a rock, and what's a pronghorn. And that's what it really comes down to here is, okay, what am I actually seeing? What does it really mean? And taking that into an actionable sense in the steps forward. So the way I really think about clarity is distinguishing what's in your control and what's outside of your control, what you want and what you don't want, and making sure that you have all of those things defined. Because when you have things defined like that, you can live so much more effortlessly, is the way I think.
Well, I'd take your analogy one step further, and being able to determine what's a buck and what's a doe, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because what we want to do, when we focus and we have clarity in our focus, that image is clear and we have that picture of it in our mind, and we can more easily get to it and drive towards it in so many different ways. And, one of the things I think is just really interesting with our mind, and I don't know what the medical terminology is, but test this out. It's the fact that our subconscious continues to work towards the things we're thinking about. The easiest example is, hey, you're hanging out with somebody at lunchtime and you're talking about, I don't know, maybe some movies you watch, oh man, what's the name of that guy that was in that movie? And you're like, oh man, I can't think of what I know what it is. And you're frustrated. You're like trying to squeeze that information out of your brain. And then 4 hours later, that guy's name, boop, pops into your head. And the reason that is because our subconscious, this nugget that's somewhere in our brain, I'm demonstrating my medical knowledge right now. That nugget portion of your brain that continues to operate, that subconscious that continues to focus on things that are back in here that we've thought about, helps us find those things. It goes back to the red truck syndrome I've talked about before too, right? I never see a red truck until I decide I want to buy a red truck, and then everybody's got a red truck. Holy crap, right? So that's that subconscious in our mind. And when we have a clear picture of what we want, then we can find it and achieve it. Because even if we're not consciously working on it right then, our mind, our subconscious is still doing the work for us. And that's a really interesting tool to tap into.
Right. It's like we've talked about with focus, and on your path, right? When you're moving forward, when you have clarity about it in the back of your mind, you're always working towards that. When you're thinking about things that you're really passionate about, when you what you really want, and especially what things that you have control over, your mind will always be going on it. And then things, like I said, become effortless with it. This is the difference, when we talk about having focus, how when you have focus and you're seeing what you really want to do, it gives you something to look at. and it gives you something to pull yourself forward with, right? To me, clarity takes that the step further to where it's separating things into what you want and what you don't want. And then it makes every single decision you're making so much simpler when you look at things that way. It's no longer a sitting there rolling out of bed going, oh, what am I going to do today? No, I'm going to go out and I'm going to grow my business today. And I know what that looks like. And I know what I want for my business. And I know what I don't want for my business, because that's just as important, because you can't be wasting time on efforts that you don't want and that aren't contributing to your goal. And so you have to have that clarity to define what's contributing and what's not contributing.
Yeah, well, and then the other thing I throw out there on clarity that I always think of is, my land navigation example. So I'm out in the woods and I have to get from point A to point B. And I use my map to design a plan, to create a plan to get from where I am to where I want to go, right? So the tools I've got, compass, protractor, and a map, and my feet. And I can take off and start walking towards point B, a hilltop, let's say, if you will, out in the woods. But as I get closer to it, I have a clearer picture of it. And I can start to do micro adjustments to my path. Because when I take off and I've got to go 5,000 meters, 5 kilometers, then I'm just kind of taking off and going. But as I get closer and I use the terrain and all these other tools that also come into play to guide me there, I do fine tune adjustments because I can see where I need to go. I have a clearer picture. I have clarity in my vision of that goal, and I make those adjustments as I go along. So each step towards a goal gets you a clearer picture of what that goal accomplishment is like.
Yeah. And I think this really holds true when you're talking about, personal clarity or clarity in your business. It's all about anything we're talking about here. You can apply to yourself or you can apply it to your business. I think if you were going to ask either of us, we would say apply it to yourself and it'll naturally be applied to your business, because that's the way life works. But the thing is, when you're in this point, I talked about it almost being effortless. What it reminded me of now, as we're talking through it a little bit more, is that point of clarity. Because I don't think it's an ever, there's gurus out there who probably would argue and they're meditating all the time, but you're not always at this point of clarity. But when you are, that's really what we've talked about before, is your state of flow. That point, that effortless state I'm talking about, is you're just in a state of flow to where your preparation is meeting to what the challenge is right now. You have the clarity to see what you want and what you don't want, what's effective and what's not effective. And so you can move effortlessly between those and make the decisions as you need to, because it's well-reasoned choice at that point.
Well, it's the future is uncertain, right? We can create in our mind a extremely clear and detailed vision that can help pull us towards an objective, pull us towards our goal, pull us towards our vision in 5 years. We can do that. And it's by the way, a great exercise to do. If you don't have clarity in your life, that is one thing to do. And that pulls you and guides you. But you know what? I can guarantee you, bet you a couple of paychecks on this one, that vision, no matter how good you are with that vision of something out there in the future, it's not going to look like that when you get there. Now, as you're walking, you may see that, you may believe in your mind you have clarity in that outcome. But as you approach it, you realize that, well, that's not really maroon, that's burgundy, or something like that, in that sort of sense. As you approach, it gets closer and closer, and it's clearer to you. But the only way you have that clarity in it is you have to walk towards it. You have to create a vision in your mind and use that vision to draw you to it. We've talked about this before also, that clarity in your purpose. What's your why, your personal why? And by the way, going back to what you said earlier, business and stuff like that, if your business why isn't synced up with your personal why, you might want to rethink some things. Give me a call, because we probably ought to talk and help you out on that one, because your personal why should feed into your business why and vice versa, right? They should be synchronized.
100%.
Synergistic. I hate that word, but I said it. Synergistic. Synergistically clarify your purpose with yourself and your business. But going back to that, the clearer idea you have of what your purpose is, the easier it is to know which step do I take first.
Mm-hmm.
And also, visualizing that trust factor, because that's what clarity does, is when you have a clear vision of what you want, then you can step off into the unknown, because that is drawing you closer to it. And you also know that with each step, even though you're not 100% sure on it, with each step, the image of the outcome you want gets clearer and clearer.
Mm-hmm. I think the interesting thing that you're touching on there, and it's really important to highlight, is we talk a lot about having a vision for your future, a vision of what your purpose is and understanding that. And that is very different than predicting what the future is. And that's a huge distinction. When you understand your purpose and you visualize what you want that to look like, you're not writing a check that you have to cash that says, this is what my life will be like 5 years, 30 minute by 30 minute by 30 minutes throughout the day. And if it's not, then I'm a failure. No, you're setting yourself up based on the principles that you have, based on the values that you have, to move forward towards a goal like that, essentially. I was thinking to myself, doesn't matter if it's fake. Doesn't matter if your vision is fake. And what it drove me to is almost a placebo effect type thing. That when you look at so many different things, there's a German guy that comes to mind that thought he was a magic, and he was told since he was a kid that he was magic, and he healed all of these people in between after World War I and World War II. And he actually did help all these people, but it was a placebo effect. But he really helped them. And you kind of get this weird place where it's like, okay, it's a fake thing, but it had a real effect. And that's what I think you're looking at here when you talk about that vision. It doesn't matter if it's a fake vision for the future, if it's something that's not actually going to happen exactly how it is. The point is, it's something that moves you forward towards your goal. And the second piece of that it came to mind was, I was having this conversation with one of my friends the other day of how many people do you think became president in the United States actually wanted to be president until maybe like a year or two before they ran, or a tight time frame. The people that get up that way, they're just working towards a vision. It's Obama famously, he wrote in his book that he just wanted to go affect change, and he wanted to go out and affect change, and people just kept putting more opportunities in front of him. And he almost blew up his entire marriage and his whole life because all he was focusing on was his purpose of affecting change. And the next thing he knew, he was the president. He never dreamed that he would be president to affect change. All he wanted to do was to affect change. He saw that as his purpose and his vision. He didn't see the exact details of how it was going to play out because it's impossible to predict the future. So I think that's an important thing to understand there, the slight difference between those two, but then also that there's still so much of an importance to have that vision, because it does give you something to think about on a daily basis.
Well, I agree. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking about, why it's hard for people to do that, why it's hard for people to create that vision. Mm-hmm. And there's a number of reasons, but, one of the things that I've found over the years of working with people in doing this exercise is in their mind is nebulous. So they are afraid to commit to something, even though it's an exercise. It's a mental exercise in achieving, right? There's no written contracts. There's nothing that says you have to do that. But what's interesting is people are afraid of doing that, creating that vision, because they feel selfish, they feel fear, and they feel that not being worthy of achieving those things. Those three things are the top three that I've run across when I work with people to help them create that vision that they want to have. Because, really, you're writing a fictional story. And it ain't like you're trying to sell it on Amazon and be a bestseller. There's only one person that has to believe it, and that's you, right? So it's a fictional story of something that you want in the future. Mm-hmm. And the only person that has to read it and believe it is yourself. And by the way, that's a pretty damn tough audience in case you didn't know. But there's only one person that has to be satisfied with that vision. And I find it interesting that how many people, for lack of a better way of putting it, struggle with something that should be fun and leading. You know, where do you want to be in 5 years? Well, I don't know. You know, I'd like a job, and it'd be nice to, you know, have a good, decent paycheck. And they'll say that. They won't say, well, I want to be making, you know, 200,000 a year. I want to be working only 28 hours a week, and blah, 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 blah. Because of those things I said, that prevents people from doing that. And the people that are successful are the ones who say, this is what I want. And they create that clarity in what they want. And with that clarity, they know where to go. Everybody else, and hey, no ding on the rest of us in the population, you know, join the pool. But, you know, if you really want to achieve something, then create that clarity in your mind, that vision of it to go get it. Otherwise, it's just a dream. I'll try to go ahead, Cam, because I know you got something, but I'm going to try and remember how Tony Robbins puts it, because he's got a great way of talking about this.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hear what Tony has to say on this. But the thing that I was thinking there is, call him right up, is that to me, that's about internal versus external locus of control. That if you're somebody who thinks that the world is happening to you, I think you will struggle to create a vision for yourself, because you can't write your own story if you're not the one writing it, right? But people who have the internal locus of control that are literally, I mean, that's the best analogy I could ever put for what that means, is you're writing your own story. That's the way you view it. When you have an internal locus of control, you view it as writing your own story. Everything is inside your control. If something goes wrong, it's your fault. If something goes right, it's your fault. That's what it gets down to there. And I think that's what you see with this. And the interesting thing there, and when you start talking about control, you know, like we said at the beginning of the episode, focusing on what's inside your control and outside your control. The reason that we say that instead of focusing on just what's inside your control and just understanding that is because there are things that are outside your control. There's a whole big world out there, and a lot of complicated things are happening in it. And you're just 1/7 billionth of what's happening on this world, even if we're just counting the people, not to even count any other random factors that we want to throw in on stuff. So there are things that are happening that are outside of your control. Okay. Check that box. That is 100% true. But there are still a lot of things that are happening that are inside your control. And you have to be able to understand the difference between those two. And I'll pose this as a little bit of a fun thought experiment that I was having while I was thinking about this for the episode, Dad. So let's say you're running a company with $1 million budget a year, right? Now, how much control do we really have over our life? Let's say 25%. If you have $1 million budget and I, as the board, allow you to operate with only $250,000, am I screwing you over? Can you still succeed? What's happening there?
Well, that's a good question, because I guess it depends on what else is going on in the business. But if I'm generating $1 million in revenue and I only have flexibility in 25% of it, then one, I'm not going to be able to grow the business because I don't have flexibility to reinvest in the business. And two, I think I'm also going to start losing members of my team, because my incentivization of the team, I'm only leading them with 25% flexibility. So how do I keep the team together too? Well, those are my two first thoughts.
Yeah. And so what I would say to that is then it's so much about understanding the context of it, right? So if you go to your team and you say, we made, $1 million, or take the example, $10 million this time in sales and $1 million in revenue that we're able to operate in revenue, right? If they're looking at that $10 million and they're only able to operate in that 250,000, their frame of reference is completely off. They will lose faith in what's happening. But what I was building towards is, once you're recognizing that, hey, okay, so you're right. Year one, I'm screwing you over. That's the answer to that question, right? Year one, me as the board, I'm screwing you over. Year two, whose fault is it now? It's kind of a fool me once, fool me twice type of thing.
Yeah.
Then in the second year, now it's you, because you know you only have that. You know you're not getting that. And you can take that 25% that you control, and you can take that and multiply it as you see fit and still take control of what's in front of you. You don't have to let that, even a majority of it, affect you. You can take even the minority that you do control, and you can go out and make moves and go forward in that situation, right? So even in that crappy situation that I used as a thought experiment to explain it, if you don't have control over every little thing, it doesn't matter that much. You just have to recognize what you do have control over, and then think outside of that situation and make your choices based on that, not based on the $10 million in sales.
No, that's great. And you adjust to the situation that you're in, right? That's what good leaders, great leaders do, is they look at what's given, the cards that are given to them, the cards that are played for them, and they make the adjustment for those cards, right? And I found my Tony Robbins quote, and I'll read it to you. If you talk about it, it's a dream. If you envision it, it's possible. But if you schedule it, it's real. So if you think about that, what we were talking about in that vision, right? We create that vision and the details of that vision. Because a dream is, I really want to own a lake house. It'd be nice to have a lake house. That's a dream. But if I envision it, I'm like, man, out there on Eagle Lake, west of Fort Worth, there's some land out there that is beautiful. I would really like to have a house on the lake. I'm envisioning it. But if I take that one step further, and what do I need to do? What are the details of that envision? And then I'll walk it back to today and say, in 5 years, I want to have a lake house on Eagle Lake in Texas. These are the steps I take to get there. This is what I have to do, to the fact of, I need this many clients. I need to generate this much revenue. I need to do blah, blah, this, and this. And you have that clarity in your action. And with clarity in your action comes confidence in execution, right? Because if you have that clarity of what to do, it builds confidence in your execution. And each confident step you take forward builds on it, right? Building on success. Because you take that step forward, you get closer, you move it forward, you move it forward, you move it forward. You have that clearer vision. And now oh, well, yeah, I thought 200 in revenue or 200 in the bank would allow me to get, no, because now I'm closer to it. I need 275 in the bank to get that house, that lake house or whatever, right? That's that clarity, but we have to move towards the target in order to have the clearer picture of the target.
Right. And I think the important thing there, when you're talking about, moving towards your goals, moving towards your target, then it starts getting into, okay, what do you control and what do you not control, and focusing on those outcomes properly. So this is where I think you actually gave me this example, which is, I'm sure I'm going to start saying that so many times because you've taught me a lot over these years. There you go. Thank you. But that when you're looking at,
write all these down so that we can put them in a book, and then I sound smart.
I write quite a lot of them down. Don't worry. We'll get that together. We'll work on that book. But really, it's, if you're going out and you're focusing on making 10 sales a week, and the thing that you are measuring yourself off of is sales, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because at that point, you are focusing on an outcome that is no longer inside your control. There are things that you can do to help people make that decision, to help people purchase your product, to convince them that your product is good and that it's worth, and that you are valuable for them. There you go. Not valuable. But the fact is, the final decision is outside of your control. So if you are focusing on that, you're going to drive yourself crazy, and you're going to start working on things that aren't actually helpful. Instead, you focus on what is inside your control, how valuable your product is, how good your business model is, how nice of a sales pitch you have, how good your communication is, how nice your language is, what your brand looks like, the colors, this. There's so many things that are inside your control, and you need to focus on those, because when you focus on something external, you're always going to be in a negative situation because you're not controlling it. Dad, how many times we talked about somebody calling your baby ugly when you're for a business, not for me. But there's going to be so many people out there that call your baby ugly, and you don't want to give those people the power over whether or not you had a successful day. If you go make 100 phone calls and none of those are sales, you still hit your benchmark of 100 phone calls, that the measurable that is inside your control, that's successful. Then what do? We have the clarity to understand what's going on, and we have a goal we are focusing on. So we adjust and we refocus our outcomes and we move forward from there. But at no point do you shift it and say, okay, well, we're focusing on what they're doing. No, focus on your control and what you have control over, because if you start worrying about things that are outside your control, you're going to lose focus, you're going to lose your clarity, and you're really, frankly, your work rate's going to drop. That's what I keep thinking about, going through a crossroad. Yeah, as you're going through your workday, you're hitting a crossroad every 20, 30 minutes of decision making, right? And clarity is that thing that says, nah, just keep going straight. Just keep going straight. We know what we're doing. Just keep going straight. There's no right turn here to go answer that email, left turn here to go answer that phone call. Just keep going straight and keep working towards your goals.
Yeah. Well, and there's a couple of things that popped into my head, that thing about how do you design your goals. And I think a lot of people do miss that mark of, hey, I want to get 10 new clients. Okay, well, that's outside of your control, isn't it? I mean, because aren't clients making the decision? Do you control the way they make their decision? No, but you can control what else you can do that may influence the client to come in. There's a formula out there in the sales world. If you want 10 new clients and you make this many calls and you tack in this many emails and that sort of thing. Well, that's what you can do. Those are the measurable things that you can do in your goals. And the outcome is 10 clients. That's the way you have to look at that, because going back to that, what's in my control and what's not in my control, it is not in my control the decision that person on the other end of the line or across the table makes and whether or not they want to buy what I'm selling. I can give them all the information, influence them. I can practice and rehearse and use all the tools. I can call up Don Miller and go through Don Miller's, get it right down to the perfect Don Miller story brand, business made simple, all those sort of things that he does. And it's still that person on the other side of the table that has to make the decision that I cannot control. All I can do is influence.
Right. The nuance comes to when you're talking about understanding what's inside your control and what's outside your control. There is, and it's really a theoretical thing at this point, but there is a line there. And it's about finding what that line is. Yes, you can't make them buy your product, but you can do everything right up into that line within some degree of morality, of course, where it's, hey, people like their first impression. So we're going to give them a donut when they walk into the sales room, right? Or, people like their final impression. We'll give them a donut when they leave the room. There's little things you can do like that can boost it. They're still making the decision. We're not telling you to go twist their arm or hold a gun to their head or anything, but you can do everything up until that line that is inside your control still. And that's what it really comes down to, is having that nuanced understanding of where that line is.
Oh, that's good. And I think this has been a really good discussion on how clarity can help you in your business and in your life. So what I learned, and it's a debate, because I was like, when you started talking about Obama's book and he says all he wanted to do was affect change. That's interesting. I'm kind of in retrospect thinking back to.
I'm paraphrasing. I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
I did not read the book.
Got it. But I'm also in that's probably not that unrealistic, because I can see how that wave of, here's this young man, he's Black, he's making, and he's a damn good orator. I mean, boy, we could all learn a lot from how he speaks and presents things. But if that's even close to what it was, that's an interesting thing, because, kind of that, oh, crap, I'm running for president.
Right.
Oh, crap, I'm in the White House. I'm not saying that's what he did, but if you think about it, that's an interesting personal insight into the man who was our president for 8 years, and still is very influential in our political system. So that's a good one. That's what I learned.
Yeah. Well, I can actually build right off of that into what I learned, because really to what that means to me, and I think it's what makes it so interesting to look at. Most people, really, I'll say this, but then especially people of like that like crazy high level of, they're so complicated. Like how they got to their point, what their visions looked like, all these different things. People are so freaking complicated. And that's actually one of the same things that you outlined to me, was you said people are afraid of creating their vision. And then you said that the two reasons that they do that is because they feel selfish. And then you hinted at the imposter syndrome, which is just so hilarious to me, because how can you have being selfish in one hand and then still feeling like an imposter for going out there in the other hand? Like but it's because we're complicated. We are really complicated creatures who are grasping with a complicated world, is what it comes down to. And so that's the reason we can't predict the future, going back to what we were talking about. And it's the reason that your vision's not going to be 100% totally accurate, but you can recognize what is inside our control, of doing that little bit of a placebo effect of having a beautiful vision and then going and doing it and turning that into real steps. That's the thing that is so interesting about when you look at those studies that talk about looking at things like the guy I was talking about was doing magic, and they talk about placebo studies like that. You know what the trick is? You give them a placebo, give them the fake boost, and then you give them a real boost. You give them the sugar pill that says, hey, your back feels better. Then you put them in physical therapy. That's what we're talking about doing. You're giving yourself a vision, and then you're just going and moving forward and taking the actionable steps to where things get clearer and clearer and clearer as you go.
No, that's great. And it brings us back to that clarity, because without that clarity, you don't have confidence in what to do next. Mm-hmm. So the challenge is, and the theme for February, because I think we kind of glossed over, Otis, glossed over that our theme for February, our word of the month for February is clarity. So we're challenging you, the Cam and Otis Show audience, to come up with a clear view of where you want to go, who you want to be. Have clarity in your actions and clarity in the outcomes you want to achieve. So think about clarity. We're going to say it, we're going to repeat it. It's going to be part of your actions, as part of our actions with Tribe and Purpose going forward. So think clarity in your actions each day and how you plan to get to where you want to be. So Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's show. Special thanks to our sponsors, Verbi Virtual Events and Tribe and Purpose. You can check out recent episodes of the Cam and Otis Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and check out a full archive at thecamandotishow.buzzsprout.com. The Cam and Otis Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next week.